Hello and welcome to News Central Television. I am Judith at TB. Here are the stories making headlines beyond the continent. And we begin the news in the Middle East, where Palestinians in Gaza have staged a rare protest against Hamas, chanting anti-Hamas slogans and demanding an end to the war with Israel. Demonstrators expressed frustration, with one protester pleading for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stop the war on the children of Gaza. The protest comes as Israel resumed heavy bombardment and ground operations after a brief ceasefire in January. Meanwhile, Israeli officials have stated that military pressure is aimed at forcing Hamas to release hostages. Netanyahu has, however, threatened to seize parts of Gaza if the group refuses, while Hamas warned that hostages would return in coffins if airstrikes continue. Since March 18, at least 830 people have been killed in Gaza, according to the Hamas-run health ministry, as fighting intensifies.
دمار يعني اجواء صعبه من الدرجه الاولى. كفاك يا حماس بيحكي في شعب قطاع غزه. كفاك يا حماس باسم الشعب بنحكي. نحن لسنا مسيرين من احد، انما هذه ضغوطات الشعب ودي ضغط، ولسه هتشوفوا وهتشاهدوا مفاجات كثير احنا محضرينها كشعب لحماس ولا غير حماس. احنا الان بكفي حماس بدها تقتل اطفالنا. حماس هي شريكه مع الاحتلال. احنا اطفالنا غاليين علينا، مش زي قيادات حماس اللي برا البلد. يلا يلا. فيش تعليم، فيش اكل، فيش ملابس. كله هذا سبب حماس. واحنا بنناشد نتنياهو معي ضارب صواريخ على الشعب الحزين، على الشعب الغلبان. كل شيء تغير علينا، كل شيء تغير علينا في البلد هذا. من الحرب، من عندنا مسكت حماس البلد، كل شيء تغير علينا. بطلنا نشتغل، بطلنا ناكل، بطلنا نكسي اولادنا زي الخلق. هم وزعوا على تبعونهم بنص الليل بيجي. خذ هاي مصاري، خذ هاي كبوات. ما بدنا حماس يا عمي، احنا ما بدنا حماس. تعبنا. بنطالب احنا في نتنياهو حبيبنا يوقف الحرب على غزة، على الشعب الحزين، الشعب اللي ماكلها. يا حبيبنا يا نتنياهو بدي ابوسك، بس وقف الحرب على الاطفال المنيلين، هم مخبيين في الانفاق.
Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has insisted that democracy is not in danger in Israel despite mass anti-government protests in recent days. Speaking in Parliament, Netanyahu accused the opposition of fueling anarchy and obstructing the government during wartime. He has defended his administration, saying critics are targeting bureaucratic power, not democracy. Thousands of Israelis have participated in ongoing demonstrations condemning Netanyahu's leadership and his decision to dismiss Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar, which the Supreme Court has blocked. The opposition has challenged the move, calling it a conflict of interest. Protesters have also criticized Israel's renewed strikes in Gaza, accusing them and arguing that they engaged hostages. Demonstrators have gathered in Tel Aviv and are set to rally outside Parliament in Jerusalem as tensions continue to rise over Netanyahu's policies.
אתם ממחזרים את הסיסמאות הלעוסות, המגוחכות, על קץ הדמוקרטיה. ובכן, פעם אחת ולתמיד, לא הדמוקרטיה בסכנה.
Joining us on the news to discuss this further is Global Affairs Analyst AGK Okpa, and he joins us live from Dallas, Texas, United States of America. Mr. Okpa, many thanks for doing this with us. I mean, let's just get started, shall we? How do Netanyahu's claim that, quote, democracy is not in danger, end quote, contrast with the concerns raised by the protesters and opposition leaders?
Well, thank you for having me. I don't think democracy is in danger because people are protesting. I think what democracy is endangered when the legislation of a country decided to go the other way, as opposed to just people expressing their anger, disappointment, or frustration by demonstrating. That does never endanger democracy. So I don't know what the concerns are, but again, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is one of those things, that is very touchy, or that they touch and go. One day is peace, the other day some people are, doing things, and then everybody's sort of, frightened or concerned. But, for the past 70 years, since Israel was formed, this thing is always going to go on.
And what are the broader implications of Netanyahu's dismissal of Shin Bet chief Ronan Bar? And how does the Supreme Court's intervention reflect tensions within Israel's political system?
Well, even before this conflict started, Netanyahu was accused of a whole lot of things, bribe, corruption, and then he has managed to use the conflict to stay in power. And typical of world leaders from that part of the world, they're always going to leverage what gives them additional time in office. So he's doing what he's able to do. He hasn't called for an election because under the military situation or the conflict going on, he's not in a position to do it. But again, he has a majority member, or the coalition he has in the Knesset is what is giving him, the edge to keep being in office, because he's been in office for as long as he has been. Again, he's taken advantage of the conflict with Hamas, and he just, again, like we say in the U.S., he's just stretching it.
Right.
He's just stretching it. Hopefully, Israelis will come to terms and get him out of there, and maybe there'll be a new wave of positivity in the conflict.
And how might the ongoing protests affect Netanyahu's leadership and the stability of his coalition government, particularly during this wartime?
Well, except if the coalition falls apart, because his members of his own party are not the majority. So the Israeli structure is such that you have to there are so many minority opposition parties, so you have to get all of them in what I call a loosely gathered bunch, and then if they agree, and then they pick a prime minister out of that. So, but if the coalition members falls apart and decide to go the other way, then he has no power to hold until he's just going to be removed, and then they will call for an election. Remember, this is a parliamentarian kind of thing. The prime minister, I think, is the president of Israel, can actually call for election, and then see whether Netanyahu will survive. There have been some concerns in the military leadership of how he's prosecuting this conflict. But again, the military people are not members of the parliament. But if they are able to exert some influence on the parliamentarians, especially the members of the coalition that gave him the power, then he's in trouble.
And just lastly, before I let you go, what does the backlash against Israel's renewed strikes in Gaza suggest about shifting public opinion on the conflict and its impact on hostage negotiations?
Well, I think if I understand your question, since President Trump came into power, he came into office, he's tried to have conversation, he's tried to bring that conflict to an end. But as historically known to the world, there's always a challenge dealing with the Palestinian and the Israeli. There's a lot of emotion that goes into the two people living next door to each other. So I don't know, what's going to happen. I don't know what, magic wand Netanyahu is going to pull, or what Trump himself is going to do in order to end this thing. Because, you look at the number of people that live in Palestine. You wonder, are those people employed? If those people were gainfully employed, they wouldn't be on the street. There will be another way. Life makes a lot of sense when people are employed. But when they're not employed, every little thing, they're going to be on the street. Everything is going to be reason to be angry and reason to blame their own government. We see some of that in America, but it's not to where, a lot of things have been disrupted. But in most countries, a lot of these people that do this are not gainfully employed. So, life has no meaning for them. They don't mind, doing things and getting shot and getting killed. For them, that's even better. It's a joy, to die in the process. So in countries where, instability is part of their daily living. That's what you're going to see. And so it behooves the leadership of those countries to do what? How do we, even with the challenges we have, how do we get our own youth employed? Because that would be so what we, they say an idle mind is a devil's workshop. That's what is going to make them, think twice about getting on the street and being very disruptive.
All right. Well, I must say thank you so much for taking out the time to join us, Mr. Okpa. Mr. Ejike Okpa, he is a foreign affairs analyst, giving us a bit of insight as a protest has broken down on the streets of Israel against Benjamin Netanyahu. Once again, thank you. Switch gears as we continue with news in the Middle East, as Palestinians in Gaza have mourned loved ones at Baptist Hospital following a deadly strike on Jabalia. Grieving families gathered at the hospital recounting the devastation. A woman described how her family was asleep when missiles struck at 1 a.m., killing her sister, her brother, and several relatives. The attack has added to the growing toll of casualties in the region, intensifying fears and uncertainty among residents. Meanwhile, footage from the hospital has shown emotional scenes as survivors search for missing family members. International responses have called for an immediate investigation, while humanitarian groups have condemned the escalating violence. However, the situation in Gaza has remained dire, with ongoing airstrikes leaving many displaced and in urgent need of aid.
نايمين في البيت فجأة نزل الساعة 1 عليهم صاروخين بس أختي استشهدت وولادها بجوزها وأخويا استشهد وأبويا مصاب في المستشفى وولاد أختي 2 لسه في المستشفى واحد في العناية وواحد في المستشفى وولاد عمامي تصاوبوا الناس أمنين قاعدين في بيوتها فجأة انضربوا وأهلي قبل هيك كمان هم يضرموا عليهم قذايف وانحرقوا يعني هاي تاني ضربة تجيهم.
هذه مجزرة من شارع غزة القديم من جباليا البلد لعائلة عيسى وعائلة النجار. كما ترون هذا كلهم أطفال أبرياء بغتتهم الطيارات الإسرائيلية في الليل وهم نائمون من دون سابق إنذار ومعظمهم أطفال ونساء.
Houthi rebels in Yemen reported that at least 17 airstrikes hit the province of Saida and Amran, blaming the United States for the attacks. The group claimed that these air raids caused significant damage to civilian property, but did not provide information on casualties. These strikes follow a U.S. military operation announced on March 15th, which aimed to counter the Houthis' attacks on vessels in key shipping routes. This offensive led to the deaths of several senior Houthi leaders, while the rebels reported 53 casualties from the airstrikes. Since then, Houthi-controlled areas have faced regular attacks, with the group attributing these to U.S. military actions. The Houthis previously targeted shipping routes in solidarity with Palestinians, and tensions have remained high over Israel's blockade of aid to Gaza. In Europe, NATO chief Mark Rutte issued a stern warning on Wednesday, stating that any Russian attack on Poland or another NATO ally would be met with a devastating response. Rutte, who was in Warsaw, he emphasized NATO's commitment to collective defense under Article 5, where an attack on one member is treated as an attack on all. He stressed that any miscalculation by Russia would be met with the full force of the alliance. His visit also coincides with increasing defense measures in Poland and the Baltic states, which fear further Russian aggression. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk noted that the limited influence European nations have on the ongoing Ukraine war negotiations, stressing the need for preparedness in these uncertain times.
If anyone were to miscalculate and think they can get away with an attack on Poland or on any other ally, they will be met with the full force of this fierce alliance. Our reaction will be devastating. This has to be very clear to Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin and anyone else who wants to attack us.
Russia and Ukraine have reached an agreement for a naval ceasefire in the Black Sea following 3 days of peace negotiations in Saudi Arabia, mediated by the United States. Additionally, the parties have agreed to take steps to enforce a prior commitment to avoid targeting each other's energy infrastructure, according to the White House. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expressed cautious support. He, however, voiced concerns over the U.S. decision to raise restrictions on Russian exports, arguing that it would weaken the position of Ukraine's allies. Zelensky noted that Ukraine had hoped the ceasefire would begin immediately, but Russia insisted on the lifting of sanctions related to Russian agricultural exports, one of the disagreements regarding implementation details. Discussions are ongoing over a potential deal on extracting minerals in Ukraine.
Що можна залучати, окрім Америки, треті сторони, тобто це непогано, наприклад, когось з Європи або, наприклад, Туреччину, можна щодо ситуації на морі, так, може хтось з Близького Сходу, щодо енергетики, тобто це окремі технічні питання. Але третій пункт про те, що контроль важливий, моніторинг важливий і можна залучати інші країни.
Let's go on a short break, shall we? When we return, French actor Depardieu has rejected allegations, saying accusations are misconstrued. We'll take a break and we'll bring you that news after the break. Stay with us. And the news continues in Europe, where French actor Gerald Depardieu has continued to deny allegations of sexual assault as his trial enters its third day at the Paris Criminal Court. Depardieu, who is 76, has insisted he did not touch Sarah, one of the two complainants who has accused him of groping during the filming of Les Wildfires in 2021. Sarah has testified that he placed his hand on her buttocks and later assaulted her twice more. Her lawyer, Claude Vincent, has criticized the French actor for failing to understand what constitutes as sexual assault. The actor has maintained that any contact was accidental and has dismissed claims of misconduct. The trial has seen conflicting testimonies, with Sarah describing fear of professional consequences, and the French actor Depardieu arguing he is being unfairly portrayed. More witnesses, including actress Fanny Ardant, are expected to testify.
Non, c'est pas tendu, c'est une agression en belle et due forme. Appelez ça tendu si vous voulez, mais voilà. Non, mais les débats sont pas épidermiques. Non, mais non, les débats sont pas épidermiques. Il y a un côté de la barre qui agresse l'autre côté de la barre, c'est tout en fait. Nous on n'a pas il n'y a pas d'épidermie de notre côté, si vous voulez. Nous on fait notre travail en fait.
Quand Gérard Depardieu dit qu'il n'arrive pas à définir une agression sexuelle, vous êtes un peu choqué par rapport à ça?
Je vous laisse apprécier. Non, je vous laisse apprécier le fait que quelqu'un qui soit mis en examen pour des faits de viol, renvoyé devant un tribunal pour agression sexuelle, à ce jour ne soit toujours pas capable de qualifier.
Germany says it remains committed to making Europe the first climate-neutral continent, a decade after the Paris Agreement. Speaking in Berlin alongside André Corey do Lago, the president of the upcoming UN COP30 conference in Belém, Brazil, the German foreign minister Annalena Baerbock reiterated her country's climate goal. Correa do Lago highlighted the importance of addressing climate action amidst significant geopolitical challenges, including the need for the private sector to contribute more. He also emphasized the necessity of increased climate funding for poorer nations. COP30, which marks the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, will serve as a critical platform to defend and advance global climate commitments despite setbacks such as the U.S. withdrawal from the pact.
100 Milliarden Euro für den Klimaschutz. Die Wende hin zur sauberen Wirtschaft der Zukunft bleibt dennoch für uns alle ein riesiger Kraftakt, denn es geht eben nicht nur um die Finanzierung. Aber es geht auch darum, deutlich zu machen, dass sich diese Investitionen in Klimaschutz lohnen, und zwar für alle.
And let's now off to U.S., where Democrats in the United States House of Representatives have criticized the Trump administration after a journalist was accidentally added to a group chat where U.S. officials were discussing sensitive military actions against Yemen's Houthi rebels. Congresswoman Mickey Shirley expressed concern, stating that the breach puts lives in danger, and called for an investigation into the incident. The journalist, Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic, was inadvertently included in the chat detailing the airstrike plans. President Trump downplayed the situation, denying any classified information was shared and defending his team. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz also acknowledged responsibility for the mistake, explaining that the error occurred due to a mix-up with contact information.
Did was outrageous. He sent secret war plans to a journalist, and the reason that is so reckless is if anyone other than people who should have had that information got it, you could put pilots at risk.
This put lives in danger. An investigation needs to take place. That is what we are calling for. And I think the House Armed Services Committee needs to hold hearings on this and get to the bottom of it so no more service members are.
Away from the U.S. and back to Nigeria. Remember, if you see anything, send us your eyewitness report to the WhatsApp number now showing on the screen. And while you're at it, make sure to follow us on social media. We're at News Central TV on every social media platform. You can always watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422. We're now on GoTV channel 23. Find us on Star Times channel 274. We're also on Apple TV and stream us live on YouTube. Hey, thanks for watching. I am Judith at TV. Bye for now.